Add one more source of tension to the strained Sino-American relationship: foreign students. This week, Chinese Education Authority warned Chinese students and scholars who hope to study in America about a troubling trend, what they see as an uptick in American visa delays and denials. The Chinese are the largest community of foreign students at universities in the U.S. and a major source of tuition dollars. On Monday, China's Ministry of Education warned Chinese students and scholars to, quote, evaluate their options before studying abroad and to beware of safety risks. In response, the U.S. State Department said it tightened scrutiny after identifying a rising number of cases of foreign students involved in intelligence gathering while in the U.S. Is the increased scrutiny linked to the ongoing trade tensions? How might the trend impact both sides? Joining me in the discussion here in the studio are Professor Gong of the University of International Business and Economics and Rick Dunham, co-director of the Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me just give a little bit of background here. According to the China Scholarships Council, among the 10,300 Chinese students sponsored by the Chinese government to study in the U.S., 330 had to delay their plans due to visa issues. That's accounting for about 3% last year. Now, during the first quarter of this year, a total of 180 out of 1,400 students had to change their plans for the same issue, visa denial and delays. That's almost 14%, so a significantly jump. But there are some details here, and I want to get that clear first. We're talking about Chinese students sponsored by the Chinese government. Exactly what does that mean, John?
Well, I guess that's the students using the government scholarship. The Ministry of Education has a scholarship program for, I think, mostly PhD students who apply for American universities, and once they get admitted, they will get scholarship from the Chinese government. And some of my students at UIBE are also applying for programs like this, and historically, they're very easy for them to go to the United States. But now it looks like it's becoming increasingly difficult.
What's the difference between this group of students and the Chinese students who apply and go on their own without getting Chinese government sponsorship? Is there a distinct difference?
But the funding is different. One is sponsored by the Ministry of Education scholarship program. The others might be funded by themselves or funded by, in the case of PhD programs, for example, usually the funding is provided by the university they're applying to. They offer some kind of assistantship, teaching assistantship, research assistantship, or simply fellowship grants. I don't know if the visa application would make a difference with respect to these two kinds of programs. My guess is it shouldn't. I mean, these are the same students, same type of students. It's just the funding is different.
I think it's not that it's Chinese government scholarship. I think that these PhD students are more likely to be in what would be considered sensitive subject matter, like some of the science research or security issues. And these are the ones where there are rare examples where students have been caught stealing intellectual property. But it really shouldn't matter who is funding the students. And really, there's no room for politics in these colleges if the students are qualified.
Because it seems that there's a particular scrutiny against these kind of students who are getting. So I guess maybe the perception on the American side is that if you're kind of sponsored by the Chinese government, maybe you're at a particular risk of being corrupted or whatever, well, linked to espionage charges.
That's the logic, whether it's true or not. I mean, I don't know if there is any evidence that's been released to back it up, but you stated the logic exactly.
Well, let's talk about the logic. Yeah, the U.S. State Department says it tightens scrutiny because of the identification of an increasing number of instances where foreign students are involved in intelligence gathering activities while in the United States, and often they were co-opted by foreign intelligence services. That's the kind of wording that we're using. So does that form the kind of sound basis for policy making in terms of visa issuance?
I haven't seen any reports that document solid empirical evidence that this is actually true. Okay, this is something I've been talking about in Washington D.C. by politicians, especially the Republican senators like Marco Rubio. They've been talking about this, but so far I haven't seen any real statistics showing that there's an increasing trend of Chinese students involved in so-called espionage activities. So I think it's anecdotal evidence. Some couple of cases here and there, which is not surprising to me. I mean, there are people involved in activities like this, but if we're talking about rigorous statistics that really characterize this trend, I haven't seen any yet. I haven't seen the numbers yet.
And I think focusing on this small group of students, I mean, we're talking 1,000 plus, is really misleading, because there are tens of thousands of Chinese students in campuses all around America. Their parents are paying the tuition. They applied. They got in. They have nothing to do with the Chinese government except that they're Chinese citizens. And they're caught in the middle here. And I think that's really what we should focus on, and not let the political disagreements turn this into an educational Cold War.
Yeah, well, that's a very big word you're using there. I hope it is, but let's just look at potentially what this kind of confrontational or tension could affect in terms of economy in the United States. I mean, Chinese students constitute about 1/3 of all foreign students in the United States. That's the number stands at something 360,000 most recently, and it was observing an increase of 4%, and that number is likely to at least stay flat, if not dropping. And they're spending about $1.3 billion in terms of tuition fees and living expenses. So what's happening here? Do the universities or does the U.S. government not see these revenue as important or beneficial anymore?
Well, let me start with the universities. Universities see it as essential, especially state universities, because state governments across America have cut back on government funding for the state universities. Foreign students, international students, pay 100% of the cost, and they pay more than in-state students. So it is a benefit for the state universities in America to bring in foreign students. China has so many highly qualified students you could almost fill up your freshman class with students applying from China. So the schools are accepting a large number. They're caught in a political bind in a way, because, again, the same people who are funding them are also politicians who are criticizing China. And so some of the state universities, I think, are holding back on the political pushback. A lot of the private universities, the Harvards, the Columbias, the USCs, are speaking out on this issue.
What could be the potential consequence, though, impact, though, if an important source of high-quality students are, rejected or banned or prevented from entering American universities? Is that a loss for America? Is that a loss for China?
Well, I think it's a loss for both. I mean, as the co-director of a program that has students from 15 countries in it, I know how everyone benefits from the cross-cultural communication. It's a benefit for China to have students who go abroad and learn about other cultures and then come back with their knowledge and
or stay abroad, right?
Or right, exactly. That's what I say. Either way,
yeah.
It's a benefit. It's a benefit for China. I think it's a benefit for America or other countries hosting the Chinese students, because you are learning firsthand what Chinese people are like. It's not the headlines in the newspapers. It's not stereotypes. I think the more person-to-person relationships, the better.
Right.
The better, sure.
The Chinese community has played an indispensable role in America's innovation. If you go to the leading laboratories in the United States, the National Laboratories and the Department of Energy, for example, you go to the laboratories and the leading universities, in the laboratories and the leading high-tech companies, there's a large proportion of workers and researchers are coming from China. I used to be part of that. I used to work for Bell Labs. In the Bell Labs, we have a lot of students, a lot of people from China.
So what is happening here? What is happening here is the United States willingly hurting itself in order to curb exchanges with China.
Well,
Is that what we're
well, that's
seeing
the
here?
theory. That's the theory. That's the theory proposed by those geostrategists in Washington D.C. thinking that China has benefited a lot from this kind of exchanges.
More than the United States.
And more from the United States, and they want to decouple this. They want to decouple this. And I also want to mention the hit, the immense hit. I would say a lot of these liberal arts colleges in the United States right now, the total college enrollment has been climbing down, actually. There's a lot of difficulties for those sort of second-tier and third-tier small colleges, especially, I think, in the southern states, in North Carolina and these states.
Yeah.
And with the students' population cutting off from China, it's going to be a huge hit for these universities. And I will see more bankruptcies, more closures of these liberal arts colleges and universities.
Well, let me quote the Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz here. He said, too many universities, I think, are gullible, are not realizing the magnitude of this threat, meaning the China threat. This is a concerted, organized, systematic threat to undermine our universities and undermine our economy, and we need to be serious to combat it. Is there anything that the U.S. could gain out of treating
That's total
Chinese
nonsense.
students like
That's
this?
total nonsense.
But this kind of
in the state
opinion
of Texas, let me talk about. In the state of Texas, for example, University of Texas, Texas A&M University, the medical center in Galveston, Baylor College, Baylor University's medical center. There are so many Chinese students and researchers contributing to the American innovation in these fields. So when he talks about, this is a concerted effort from China, blah blah blah, I think this is an insult to the Chinese community in the United States, as well as a insult to the American education system and research communities.
Rick?
I mean, I know Ted Cruz. I've known him since he was in his 20s, a young staffer for George Bush. It doesn't make sense. I mean, that's political rhetoric. My university, Tsinghua, in the journalism school, has two PhDs from Texas, University of Texas, Texas A&M. They're brilliant scholars. They came back. They're teaching here. I mean, I think it's just political rhetoric, but it's seeping into education, and they make it harder for people like us to have these cross-cultural relationships. And that's what I fear, is politics seeping into education.
Yeah, and the perception is that Chinese students are increasingly thinking of going elsewhere. Right, I think the emotion part, the emotion is being affected.
It's the perception of the visas getting more difficult, the admissions getting more difficult, that is deterring students from applying to the United States. It's going to be a loss for both China and the United States.
Well, we'll keep a close watch on the situation. It's not good, but at least we talk about it and see whether there is anything that can be done about it. Many thanks to Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and Rick Dunham, co-director of Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University.